Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Hype. For today's episode, we go back to the magical time of early 2019, where everyone was free to lick all the doorknobs they came across, and no one was washing their hands. Speaking of spreading disease and being gross, let's jump into today's topic, EA Bioware's tragic attempt at a looter shooter, Anthem. Let's jump back to February 1st, 1995, 25 years ago. Bioware is founded by Greg Sachuk and Ray Musica, and I'm apologizing if I butchered those names, along with Greg's cousin Marcel, Augustine Yip, and Brent and Trent Oyster. I'm going to be honest with you, I'd be a bit pissed off at my parents if they named me and my brothers rhyming names. It seems rude. It seems rude more than anything. Greg and Ray were recent med school grads and had a background in programming and had created a medical simulation program. Using the funds from the medical field, they launched their own gaming company officially on May 22, 1995. Through the rest of the decade, Bioware would launch its first game, Shattered Steel, in 1996 and Baldur's Gate in 1998. Baldur's Gate was such a success that this prompted Sachuk and Musica to leave the field of medicine to become programmers full-time for the company. I don't know how difficult it is to go through med school. I barely handle making YouTube videos, as seen in just this being my second one. But you have to really love gaming to just completely decide to just change your career midpoint like that. So anyway, the 2000s was when Bioware started to become a household name in the eyes of gamers everywhere. The sequel to MDK was handed over to Bioware and released on March 31st of 2000, along with the sequel to Baldur's Gate, which was later released in September. The development company really struck it big with the release of Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic, with Casey Hudson as director and producer of the game in July of 2003. And remember that name because we're going to be talking about him a lot later. The game gained critical acclaim with critics and gamers alike, both of which citing the game's story, characters, and sound design. The game sold out within the first 4 days of the first Xbox shipment, which accounts to about 250,000 copies, making it the fastest selling title at the time. And by the end of October, it had sold more than 600,000 copies. The PC version of the game by August 2006 had sold more than 470,000 copies and earned $14.7 million in the United States alone. The Sith Lords was released on December 6th of 2004 to positive reviews, but regarded as not as good as the first one, which, considering the acclaim of the prior title, was going to be a high bar to hit. Later, Bioware would release the Jade Empire of April of 2005, an original IP based in Chinese folklore, and saw the player character dubbed the Spirit Monk adopt different fighting styles to save their tutor, Master Li, from the dastardly corrupt Emperor Sun Hai. The game received positive reviews, however sold below expectations, which was believed to be because of the release window as it came out around the same time as Doom 3. It was during this time that Bioware sought to change up their corporate structure, along with Pandemic Studios, known for their work of the Destroy All Humans franchise and the wildly popular original Star Wars Battlefront series. Bioware would be joining up with a private equity firm, Elevation Partners, in November of 2005. This was done for Bioware to expand and grow their development team, however, it would prove to be the start of a downward tumble. On October 11, 2007, the joint venture between the two developers and equity firm, now known as VG Holding Corp., was bought by Electronic Arts, known for its Madden series and for treating gamers like endless coin purses for them to bleed dry. Not long after the acquisition, we saw the release of the first installment of the Mass Effect series, and once again we see Casey Hudson as the director of it. The game was a massive commercial success and would prompt a sequel also helmed by Hudson. The breakout success of a new IP caused EA to announce a restructuring of their role-playing and MMO game development. Over the following years, several Bioware studios opened up in LA, Sacramento, San Francisco, and Montreal. These are in addition to the studio's branches in Austin and Edmonton. Ray Musica, who was the general manager of Bioware at the time, was appointed to the group manager of this new cluster of studios known as the Bioware Group, while Greg Sachuk was made group creative officer of the new MMORPG studio group, which consisted of parts of Bioware and other studios that had been acquired by EA. These two founding members of Bioware would then lead long and satisfying careers under the EA flagship. Let me check my notes real quick. No, they didn't. Sachuk and Musica would announce in May of 2013 that they were retiring from the video game industry. That's not leaving the company, mind you. I mean, they left the company, obviously, but they retired from gaming. 4 years of working under EA. 4 years. These guys who had completely changed what they thought they were going to do in their lives to make video games, and then 4 years of working under EA, and they were like, you know what? We just don't want to do any of this ever again. During this time, Bioware saw more cancellations than actual game releases. Warhammer Online Wrath of Heroes, Command & Conquer Generals 2, and Shadow Realms all were canceled between 2013 and 2015. EA and Bioware would see the release of Dragon Age Inquisition in November of 2014 to mainly positive reviews. However, just a couple years later saw the release of Mass Effect Andromeda. Coming off the heels of Mass Effect 3 ending controversy, which they ended up having to put out a DLC because everybody hated that ending so much, we then see Mass Effect Andromeda, which we do not even have time to get into how bad that game was. Let's just say the critical reception of the game was so negative that it caused EA to just take this premier title, this IP that had done so well, and they just put it on a shelf, and then they were like, no, stay there. This was up until recently during the Video Game Awards in 2020, where they did finally announce that they are going to be making another Mass Effect game. When? Who knows? Soon? Maybe? Probably. Also, there is going to be a Mass Effect Legendary Edition coming out, which I think is the first 3 games. It'd be really funny if they did try to piggyback Andromeda on there too, just to boost their sales numbers. Anyway, so what does this have to do with Anthem? Well, back in 2012, before the mass exodus of original Bioware people, Casey Hudson started development on a game that was codenamed Dylan, because like its namesake, Bob Dylan, and this is an actual quote, the game would be talked about for years. Which, let me check my notes again, and oh yeah, it was a dumb name. It was a dumb name. For his opinion on the matter, we go to Bob Dylan.
I can't do a Bob Dylan impression though.
The real Bob Dylan could not be reached for comment because I didn't try. Also, I don't think he would take my call. And also, it's Bob Dylan. Can you imagine having to go to Bob Dylan and explain to him, like, hey, they made a game where you run around in mech suits and everybody hated it. I'm not going to do a Bob Dylan impression, but I think he would probably think I either did too much or I did not do enough drugs back in the day. Anthem, as the game would later be known as, originally started off as a cooperative survival action game. It saw the players use mech suits to survive on a planet that was basically like the Bermuda Triangle that attracted all kind of hazards and dangers to it. The players would team up to do supply runs to upgrade their suits, while the game would trigger world events to have the players adapt to situations as they happened. That game sounds awesome. However, in 2014, Casey Hudson would leave the company believing that Bioware Edmonton, the studio developing Anthem, was in good hands, and let me check my notes again. He was wrong. Why do I have notes? I know all these answers. With Hudson's departure, the game development started to see some problems. People on the Anthem team were already worried with him leaving because his leadership allowed the people involved to stay on point, and they were worried the game would fall into similar problems that the Mass Effect Andromeda and Dragon Age teams had come across. In his absence, the team found problems with scaling issues with the Frostbite engine, which EA game development manager Patrick Suderland wanted all games to run on, and he also left the company too, later in 2018. David Gator, who had worked on the Dragon Age games as a story writer, was brought in to help flesh out the narrative arc for Anthem, which also led to more issues, putting strain on artists and designers, as he wanted the story to be closer to the styles of Dragon Age and Mass Effect series. However, Gator himself would also leave the company in early 2016, and the story was brought back to what was originally wanted by the team. Back to Sutherland before he left. In early 2017, he got his hand on an early demo, and he expressed great concern over the title and really pushed for the game to utilize the EA DICE engine, which they're the ones who created the Frostbite engine. And Sutherland, I'm sure unrelated, was also formerly the CEO of EA DICE. He wanted a demo ready for E3 2017 later that year, and if the game did not perform well, it could potentially get canceled. Couple that with the resounding failure of Mass Effect Andromeda, a lot of people at EA were looking at Anthem, at this point in development for 5 years, to be a hit and recoup losses from the other titles. The E3 trailer of Anthem, while impressive in the gameplay and graphics, did have longtime fans of Bioware worried. seeing an action-based looter shooter, a term used for games where you go and shoot things and then you take their loot and then you use that loot to shoot other things. So, hey, now you know what that means. This looter shooter seemed a departure from the traditional story-heavy and character-driven narratives. At this point, the game was changing so much internally that the team was stressed and overworked to reach the deadline for the game, which, with constant shifting of personnel to and from projects, like they took key members off this game to go work on their FIFA series, which they release the same FIFA game every year. I don't know why you need to be shifting people in and out of that. Key developers leaving regularly, and one guy just straight up dying during development. They even brought back Casey Hudson in July of 2017 to help right the ship for release. Let me check my notes again, and he didn't help. I keep dropping things off my desk. My desk is gross. He didn't help. It didn't help. Before we talk about the release of the game, let's talk about pre-orders. Now, a lot of people hear pre-orders and immediately get the hairs stand up on their neck, and that's understandable. Pre-orders are a standard in video games this day and age, and even up till a couple years ago, you could even argue that they'd be necessary. In addition to the cost of development and marketing, games once upon a time were released on these tiny, shiny discs. Even before then, some people say cartridges. You would then take those discs and you'd put them in a disk drive in your computer and or your console. And they did pre-orders. So the brick and mortar stores like GameStop in their heyday, this was so they knew how many titles to order. So if you pre-ordered, you were guaranteed to get one. And if there was a lot of pre-orders, they knew to bring in even more. Now, as digital downloads of titles have become the standard, there's less reason for pre-orders. To adapt for this, most companies now offer special pre-order bonuses. That can be anything from special limited time armor and equipment to exclusive missions to even getting early access to the game. Then there was Anthem's pre-order. Look at this chart. If you have to have a chart in order so people know how your pre-orders work, then you screwed up doing pre-orders. First, there was the standard pre-order, which got you access to the VIP demo and then the game on its February 22nd release. Then there was the Legion of Dawn pre-order bonus, which got you the same thing as before and some armor in the game. Then there was the EA Access and Origin Access for the Xbox and PC, which got you the demo, and the Play First trial, which let you play the game up to 10 hours starting on February 15th. Then there was the Origin Access Premiere for PC that got you the demo, and instead of only 10 hours on February 15th, you got early access to the game. How insulting does that have to be, by the way, for you dumped a bunch of money? Like these were more expensive versions of the game. So you had to pay more to play the game early, but if you didn't pay as much as the most amount you could pay, you only got to play 10 hours of the game, which at that point, based on how the release of Anthem went, that you would need 2 of that 10 hours to realize that you basically just tossed your money down the drain. Now, if having to reserve a game to play its demo seems weird, and let me check my notes, look at that, they're here. That is because it is. Most online-only games will feature a stress test beta open to the public prior to the game's release. This is done to test network and server stability and gets the game in the hands of people to get them excited and nets you some free bug testers. However, Anthem's demo was so bad and so bug-riddled that it completely gutted what little excitement people had for the game. First off, the VIP demo, released almost a month before the actual release date, faced all the problems. Game Rant listed the core issues, seen here, infinite loading screens that happen when loading the game, and then loading missions in the game that you already loaded, and then unable to even get 2 loading screens, you couldn't get past the title screen, to even players on the Xbox One not being able to access the Anthem VIP demo. Also, not being able to access codes for their friends so they could also play. That's kind of a big deal in an online-only game where you play with other people. People want to play with their friends. At least, so I'm told, all my friends, they only play Grand Theft Auto and WoW Classic. Couple that with server and network issues and literally every bug you can think of. A lot of people expected the game to once again get delayed. The public demo released the following weekend and saw a lot of the same problems and even saw some people getting their systems completely bricked because of the technical problems of the game, which is something that just shouldn't happen. The game still saw its release on February 22nd, and to no one's surprise, pretty much the same problems in the demo were unfixed. Metacritic scores range from 59 to 65 depending on the system you were playing it on, and user scores are even lower. Bugs aside, the gameplay was even harped on for being too dependent on RNG elements, random number generators, and not enough loot drops to offset that, which is really tough for people in a looter shooter. Some people were holding out hope that over the next couple weeks the game would see improvements. As it's being an online-only game, the shelf life of the title was expected to go on for a while. They said 10 years. That was laughable. However, while the bug fixes and loot tables were fixed, the endgame of Anthem left little to be desired. While additions to the microtransactions market kept cycling in, once the campaign mode of the game was done, there was little to do other than grindy quests and hoping you were not disconnected enough to go start playing Destiny 2, which was considered Anthem's main competition, or Tom Clancy's The Division 2, which was released a couple weeks later. In the coming months, we saw Anthem's player base drop off dramatically, and even the addition of Cataclysms, their in-game content, a whole 6 months after release, was not enough to bring players back to the game. Shortly after that, Anthem announced that they would end seasonal content for the game, which at this point was mainly different stuff you could buy in the marketplace. At this point, Bioware announced that a team of 30 people were working on a substantial reinvention of the game. And short of varying blog posts at the time of this recording, we still have no concrete information what that could mean. Also, Casey Hudson left Bioware again in December of 2020, so we very well could not be seeing anything on Anthem ever again. So here we are, almost 2 years after the release of Anthem. Bioware, a company created by fans of gaming who took that love of the craft and went on to release hit after hit, found itself in the clutches of a company who either believed that control over all their IPs was the key to releasing hit titles, or they cared so little about the quality and the requests of both their employees and customers and only cared about the bottom dollar. It's really easy to look at EA and see them as the bad guy in this situation, and it is easy because it's so evident that that's the case. EA CEO Andrew Wilson said this of Anthem: "No beta test can tell you how a player is going to feel over the long term in market that has grown from a 10 to 12 hour single player games to 40 to 80 or 100 plus hour gaming experiences. They can only point out the most glaring issues. And even with 2 weekends of player testing, Anthem's biggest flaws simply couldn't be detected." Now, I originally picked Anthem as the topic for today's show because I thought it'd be a fun way to poke fun at EA and how focusing on the payday is sometimes more costly than worrying about the quality of game at launch. However, reading more about Andrew Wilson and his thoughts on Anthem actually pissed me off. And in case you do not speak corporate BS, what he is saying is that it is not the company's fault that the game was bad. It was unforeseeable. Anybody involved couldn't see how Anthem was just going to be a dumpster fire at launch. Here's another quote from Andrew Wilson, who I think at this point has not talked to anyone who makes less than 6 figures a year. "Making fun is hard." Making fun is easy. Fun can be something as simple as bouncing a ball or throwing a trash can at your brother. Making games is hard. It's made even tougher when you buy up a well-established brand like Bioware, regularly shifts people around so they do not know what project they're working on, takes such a controlling stance on your new IPs as to run off the people who created those titles in the first place, do mass layoffs while bringing in $5.15 billion as reported in 2018, then take such brands after you'd wrested them from the established creators and proceed to bleed every ounce you can out of that stone. As long as people like Andrew Wilson run companies like EA, and as long as companies like EA continue to strip the good name of company like Bioware to shreds, this unfortunate trend of gaming will undoubtedly be the standard for the time to come. I know we ended on a super negative note. That's why I want to say, if you did enjoy Anthem, that's great. I'm glad you did. In all honesty, for what little I did play of it, I did. When it did work, and that's the key word there, when it did work, it was a lot of fun to fly around and shoot bad guys, even if it was just by yourself. And that's the important thing to look at, is if you had fun with it, that's great. But just remember, you could have had so much more fun with it if EA had just gotten out of their own way. Anyway, I hope you liked this video. If you did, give us a like and subscribe and check out all our social medias. And if you disagree with me, leave a comment with whatever insulting name you want to call me. I'm not going to give you ideas because I try not to cuss on the show. But yeah, Anyway, and now back to Bob Dylan.
That's a nice looking trash can you got there.